this public. Okay, so let's see who's here. Okay, great. Well, uh, tomorrow on the um, the community practice, I'm going to kind of give an overview, but I wanted to talk about three things today. And this wasn't what I'd planned. I don't know if I ever said what I'd planned, but it's not it, whatever that was. When I go on trips like this, which was, we came up here to actually see Bruce Springsteen, but then we made it longer just to have some fun and relax in the city. And it gives me a time to reflect on things. So I'm going to talk about three things, not necessarily in this order, although maybe I will. One is I'm going to call it a reality check. And I think this is important for people to know, even though it's not like Amplio or anything like that. It's just a reality check of where the industry is. I don't know. I just woke up. I saw somebody who's obviously a unique kind of developer, really good, getting endorsed by Dan North, which is amazing, who's looking for work. And it just hit me something about the competency of people and kind of what's happened over 50 years. I do want to talk about a new way of looking at Amplio. I'd been thinking about something, and then Susan made a comment that really triggered it. And I want to talk about thinking not of Amplio at all as creating a configurable framework, but creating a set of agreements we work with. It seems to me that's really what I'm talking about, and why I haven't talked about it for a while is not really important. There's no technical reason for it. And I actually believe there is a need for certification, so I want to talk about that too. So, good. I'm glad Thomas is here for this because he brings another angle to this. Okay, so Thomas, I was just saying these are the three things I'm going to talk about. This is not what I had said I'd do. I don't even remember what I said I did, but I just had this feeling this morning this was important. And anyway, these sessions are always to me a kind of filling in the gap of things because originally we weren't supposed to have any sessions this week, so they're kind of extra. Take advantage of that. Okay, so when I started out in software in 1970, actually doing it, I'd been reading about it for a couple of years when I was in high school in 68, 69. That's when I got interested in pattern recognition and artificial intelligence. Well, they didn't call it AI then, although there was an AI lab, or it was just about to become one at MIT. And it became very clear that during the 70s, it was kind of an exciting field. There weren't that many of us who were there. Most of us were kind of competent because it was definitely innovators and early adopters. Um, and a lot of people had actually been in it. A lot of the thought leaders, like, Jerry Weinberg had been in it in the 60s, Tom Gilbin in the 60s. So I wasn't kind of new to it, but there weren't that many. And then from the 70s, it kind of really expanded out. Pattern recognition started coming into existence. That's when a lot of the government agencies and private companies were looking at pattern recognition for weather satellites and or for weather and things like that. Um, but it wasn't until the PC came out in 1980 that things really started to explode. It had already been where there weren't enough competent people. You had people getting into programming with like a 3-day workshop, or rather not a 3-day, 3-day book that would take you C for idiots. That came, I don't remember when those came out, but there were all these quick ways to get into programming by the late 70s and early 80s. And what programming was not understood by even the best people. I mean, the best people could do it, but it wasn't understood. I was actually really good. I was one of these 10X, but I had issues. I could write systems really fast, but they were breakable easily. They were brittle. I hadn't learned how to write code that could change easily until I learned patterns in the 90s. I was just so fast I could fix things. Um, but it was later. But anyway, the point is, in around 1980, 81, 82, when the PC came out, I was looking for it this morning. I couldn't find it. But there was a Time magazine cover, I'm pretty sure it was 1980, that had a picture of a computer, but at an empty chair, and it said something like "the missing programmer." or the programmer shortage. I can't remember exactly. I think it said the programmer shortage. This is 1980. And they were talking about how there weren't enough good programmers. And there weren't because by 1980, mini computers had already taken over. See, in the 70s, you had big mainframes. They were really big, take up whole rooms and stuff. And you needed computer operators to keep them running. That's how I got fund money in college. I was a computer operator on the RCA UNIVAC Spectra 77. And um, but so there were quite a few growth in the 70s, but when the PC came out, it changed things. Because now all of a sudden, actually, when mini computers came out, it changed things. Mini computers kind of broke the whole IT. A lot of people don't actually remember why is IT the way they are? Because people weren't around in the 70s. If you were around in the 70s, you totally understand why IT is. But how many people were here? And the reason was when you only had mainframes, and all they were looking at with mainframes is how much you could jam through the mainframe. So they batch jobs. It was very expensive in the day. Nobody paid attention to the fact that mainframe sat idle at the middle of the night. They charged you just as much when the machine was idle as when it was overloaded, which gives you a clue about the accounting system that was in use. And in fact, when Japanese started killing the United States with imports, and there was all this, oh, they're doing unfair stuff and all that. No, if you understood accounting from the theory of constraints perspective, it was quite clear that what they were doing is they were taking excess capacity at night and producing it for goods to export. So it was much cheaper. Our whole capitalization approach, CapEx, OpEx, is just messed up big time. So anyway, so mini computers, you don't even see them anymore now. Um, well, my desktop's more powerful than not my desktop, my notebook is more powerful. My watch probably has more computing power than the PC, than the machine I used when I was at MIT. I used a PDP-8, paper taped input, all sorts of ridiculous things. Um, but anyway, what was happening was IT owned everything until the mini computer came out. Because you were talking about millions of dollars of investing, and then the mini, like Digital Equipment, I forget the other company that was big. There were two main companies. Susan, you probably remember. I don't remember. Besides DEC, what was that
Data
other
General,
computer? Data General. Yeah, Data General DEC.
I
DEC was a
use
big one.
those.
Yeah, yeah. I never was on a DG machine. Anyway, anyway, you could buy some of those for like a few, tens of thousands of dollars, a couple $100,000. And what people started doing, but it was still expensive, they started getting around IT. They needed a report. But what really, really broke it open was the Apple II. How did the Apple II break it open when it's not even around now? The Apple II created a program called VisiCalc, and it was the precursor to the spreadsheets we have now. But with VisiCalc, what you could do is write your own reports, download data, download data from a mainframe, write your own reports. You didn't have to break IT. IT tried controlling all this in the 80s. You had Sun Microsystems. They were talking about the computer, the network is the computer. And they would say, well, look, you get your own machine and you can control it. And they went out of business trying to break Microsoft out of business. They, for some reason, thought Microsoft wouldn't respond to them. Because with Sun, I forget the guy's name. He hated Microsoft with a passion. And well, a lot of others did too back then. But but what happened is they were saying you should be able to, you should be able to control, um, have your machines, and they were talking about then you could self-configure things and have basically lots of little machines. So some microsystems, that was 10 grand, but
Was
that
that
was like a
Scott Neely?
really the what?
Scott Neely at Sun?
Yeah, Scott Neely at Sunday. Boy, he drove that business out of business by hating Microsoft. He did everything to kill Microsoft instead of doing what they should do. They were a good company. They had a great product. And he give them some credit to get to where they got, but then he let his hatred of Microsoft. Well, it's just okay, Thomas, you'll appreciate this. My hatred of Scrum, what is it doing to me? A little self-reflection, but I'm letting go of some of the energy. Okay, so basically, Sun Microsystems was touting the fact that because it's the network, you could save a lot of money. Of course, what Microsoft came up with is .NET. They came up with the whole idea that they can configure, not .NET, but they could configure machines so you could have still machines that were controlled from an IT admin. But the point was, all of a sudden, IT no longer controlled computers. With the introduction of Office and inexpensive, like back in I remember getting very excited in 96 when I found a PC I needed for the products I was distributing through the hair salon business, and it was a $9,000. What am I saying? It was $1,000, $995. I can't remember who built it, but it was like $1,000. I could buy a machine. I could run whatever I wanted to on it. It was powerful enough back in the day. And that didn't have, it was just text based, but that was all I needed. So all of a sudden, when the PC came out, and when you had it, so the PC could be individual, PC could be in groups, and the PC could also work across an organization because McNeely saw what needed to happen, and then Gates just stomped on him and gave a better solution. See, what people didn't realize, again, this is pre-hating Microsoft. In the early days of the PC, Microsoft was a godsend to individual innovators. For $1,000, $2,000, you could buy a computer, you can buy software, you can get set up as an independent. That's what I did. I had the first portable PC. It looked like all the other PCs. It had a big monitor like this and it had a big base, but I could put it in the trunk of my car, so it was portable. And I literally used to take it home every day and bring it back to the office every day. It's just like a couple trips. But I got set up for like a couple of grand as an independent author of things. To go the next level up was on microsystems at 10 grand and more. Actually, 10 grand for the machine, the software. I couldn't afford that at the start. So this explosion of what people can do hit all three levels, hit the company, hit the department, and hit the individual. And all of a sudden, the potential was much, 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 much orders of magnitude greater than you had competent people. And there was this real rush to get people trained in programming. There were 5-day course, you can be a programmer. Read this book, 3 days. Some more involved, 14 days, you read a book. But what it taught you was how to write algorithms. That was the original idea of software. So you write algorithms. You figure out what needs to be done. You create the algorithm, the procedural coding, and everybody learned that. And that's, at some extent, still out there that way. But here's the point. What was needed was here. What we had was here. Money fills the gap. So what did it fill the gap with? Filled the gap with incompetent people. Now that's harsh to say, but it's the reality of the situation. We got a lot of incompetent people. And in my opinion, it's not gotten any better. In fact, it's gotten worse. I personally think there's a day of reckoning coming. Why do I say that? You see, I think we barely hit the tip of the iceberg, and people think that AI is going to change this, which it will, but it's not going to change it for the better. I've been getting on the online looking at ChatGPT. All ChatGPT does is give you back the mediocre answers that you get out of things like the Scrum Guide and Scrum workshops, because that's what's out there. How to solve having too many stories, how to solve, and they give actually the wrong answers to even why having short sprints are good. Short sprints are good. They're not bad because there's more of it. There's no extra overhead with short sprints. I'm sorry. Only if you don't understand why you're doing short sprints do you have extra overhead. But ChatGPT will tell you that. Why? Because that's what Scrum people say. Why? Because they don't understand the foundation of what we're doing. So what we've seen is up until today, well, not today, but this about now, is we've seen this gap between what we need in terms of people and competent people to fill the gap. And this is at all levels. I'll put it 3 main levels. One level is programming. We've known how to do good code for a long time, and it's almost not done at the same percentage as it was done years ago. I mean, there are more competent people, but from a percentage point of view, don't think so. You see people ranting against TDD and ATDD, and they have no clue. Well, I've really been doing a lot of expletive deleted here, by the way, just so you know. My energy is toward that. I've just been suppressing them. I just noticed that's about the 4th one. I had to bite my lip. But it's like people have no clue what to do in the masses. Why? Because the people who knew what to do, who driven this, they're not being listened to. And what's happened then is that, so one, I said there are three. So one level is programming. Uh, well, I could make it fourth, which would be also how to pay attention to what customers actually want. But that's always been bad. It's just gotten worse because it's in mass. The other one is in process. I see this, the same thing. It's known what to do, but people aren't doing it. Why? Oh, well, we don't have 3 to 5 day learn how to code. We have 2 to 3 day learn how to be a master. Um, so we've got all this crap, these people who just don't have any experience. And what's worse, and this is the killer. See, you don't need as much experience as people make it sound like you need. This isn't just my opinion. The thing is, let me prove it a different way. If you don't have theory, it takes an order of magnitude longer to learn. This has been said since Aristotle. And every century I could probably, if I looked for it, I already know about 5 or 6 different centuries I can pull things. Kant, Da Vinci, Aristotle, Schopenhauer. Um, it's well known, Deming, it's well known that if you don't have theory, learning is at a snail's pace. And yet we don't have theory. We don't have first, I mean, Amplio does, but theory constraints does, Lean does, Flow does. But Scrum, Safe, no. And Safe mentions it, okay, but they don't do it. So, so we've got this big gap, and what you've got is the learning process is incredibly slow because of the way things are taught. They're being taught by example. You don't learn that way. Um, and we see that why the gap's going. And now people are thinking, oh, maybe ChatGPT or AI or something like that'll help because it's going to give us the intelligence we need. But AI is not artificial intelligence. It's not intelligence at all. These are natural language processors that are pulling in whatever their people are saying, and it's amazing what they do. But it's no better than what's out there in mass because it can't tell the difference between what's good or what's not good. So it uses the algorithm. If I see it more often, it's good. Just think about what I just said there. I mean, tell me I'm wrong because I don't think I am. But I think the algorithm it applies is if the more often I see it, the more often I assume it's true. You'll never get out of the mess that way because it's the crap that's keeping us there. So, so 3 areas I said, well, four. So I've mentioned three. One is programming. One is crappy UX. I mean, the UI is so bad and it's been getting worse. The process, the fact the lack of theory. And the fourth one, I'd go a little further and say it's either it's management or product management. They're actually we separate the two, but it's kind of interesting. If you go back to how Toyota did it, they didn't separate product management and management. Oh, here's my next revelation to start talking about what's so, because I've known this for crap. How long have I known this? At least 20 years, maybe longer. Management and product management should not be separated. They weren't by lean. This was one of the big things that Ken did with the definition of Scrum, of leaving management out of the place. And even in when he came up with Scrum for the enterprise, he left management out because he doesn't like management, basically. And if anybody had been to any of his talks in the early 2000s at Agile conferences, you wouldn't disagree with me. I mean, it was very clear. But so we have this huge gap, and I think we've barely seen the tip of the iceberg because there are two problems here. Maybe at least, well, there are at least two problems here. The first problem is, of course, we have it. The second problem is, I'll just list these. So first problem is we have it. Second problem is nobody's doing much about changing what got us here. You know, it's like if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat it. Well, we got here with more certifications aren't going to solve our problem, but that seems to be the approach people are taking. More expensive training, because I do think training at the individual level, like what we're doing here, is overpriced by a factor of 5 to 10 times. When you're going to go into a company and actually do some work together, see, that's not training. We almost need a different name. That's a working session. I've gone in and I've done product management workshops that were like 4 or 5 grand a day, and they were worth it. Why? Because these guys were different when I left. Totally changed the organization. Um, But individual improvement like this, you can't learn that in 2 days, and it's way expensive. So, so product management and is also messed up. And I bought into this too because I remember thinking, oh yeah, customers don't know what they want and all that. But I remember when I actually built verticals in the 80s and 90s. I knew what the customer wanted, not because they told me, but because I watched how they worked. I saw what their problems were. I learned their finances. I learned what was making them money, what was losing them money. And I had more experience as a business guy than they had. So I was in a sense acting as a consultant to them. They didn't know it. I was just giving them product because product is the backbone of how you work. So this predicament we're in is dreary. And uh, the I think we're not even at the tip of the iceberg. This is like this big thing fell off the glacier and it's still underwater and it's just coming up. It's going to be devastating to a lot of people. And what you have to look at is the differences. This is what we need. This is where, if I say, here's what we need, here's what we have. But if I look at who do we have that's competent, goes off the screen. It's a lot lower. Okay. Now that's a problem, but that's got two problems to it. And these are all going to tie together today. One problem is how do you raise the bar of competency? Well, I really do believe that you are that future in a sense, and this is why I'm committed to sticking with Amplio University. And it's been a little frustrating. I love working with y'all so much. To be candid, this is fun for me and heartwarming for me. So don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. But I'm really frustrated at the same time um, because it's like watching something you love die. It is. It's what it's like for me. It's very painful. Um, but at least I enjoy this time with y'all. So I have that. My wife she's great. I think I love my wife dearly. And she's always asking me, do I want to keep working? And I say, yeah, it's actually fun. I mean, it's hard. I really spent a lot of time, but it's fun because it's nice to have this breath of fresh air. So what we have to do, in my opinion, is in some people can go from if this is where what we need in terms of people. Now I'm going to use hands differently. This is the level of competence we need, and most people are here. Then the question is, and these are the two problems: how do you get people from here to there? Well, I know how to do that, but that's not the problem. The real problem is how do you create a demand for people to go from here to here? That's the problem. And the reason is twofold. One is most people would rather complain about things than actually do something about it. Most people like to be victims. Now they'll say they don't like to be victims, but they do. They put somebody else as the reason that they're not doing well in life, and they'll complain about it. And a lot of people are like that. So that's part of it. Part of it is that some people really are committed to their own victimhood. Now, I say committed, I mean, they can be changed. They can get new insights and things like that. But some people are just like that. And then there are some people who aren't like that, but they don't have hope. They don't think it'll make any difference. They think, oh, well, I would do this, but I can't do this. It's not possible. Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, I remember asking Tom Guild at the end of one of your sessions why he thought that there was relatively little uptake of his competitive engineering and all his techniques, um, the language, and so on. In basically when it's all documented how to do it to be successful, and yet why do so few people do it? And his take was, in so many words, he doesn't think that people are motivated enough anymore. They are
That's right.
complacent, they're saturated, they're too lazy, whatever adjective you want to take. But that was his take on why there wasn't more interest in these methods.
Yeah, yeah. You have to think, and that's harder. But thinking is not just hard, it's terrifying. See, if you do Scrum or you do Safe or you do anything else where you're following a framework and everybody else is doing it and it fails, it's not your fault, it's its fault. I grew up, I not grew up. My first job was at IBM from 77 to 79. That was when it was Big Blue. Nobody got fired for buying IBM, even though it wasn't the best equipment. They did have the best service. Their marketing was great. And I forget the name of the guy who turned it around about 10 years later. Uh, but when they became a service
The
organization, that
Lou
was real.
Gessler,
Yeah, I think that was right.
Lou Gessler, yeah.
Yeah, you got Lou Gessler, right. That was it. Yeah, he was brilliant. I mean, he changed a dying company into a vibrant company by recognizing their skill with service.
Who says elephants can't dance, right?
He
That was
did. He got the elephant to dance. I have such respect for him because he didn't just go in there like the guy at Chrysler who made a few years success, but then it all failed because he didn't change the culture. Gessler literally changed the IBM reason for being, and yeah, made the elephant dance. That's great. So there are people who aren't motivated. There are people who haven't need to be motivated. You take a 2-day class and you can get a job. How motivated is that? And well, I can sit through, especially since I have my PC, I can play solitaire while they think I'm taking notes, and things like that. So there's motivated. I don't believe I can do it, and why bother? Because I'm getting jobs now. All of a sudden, if this is the skill level we've had acceptable, people are realizing no, it's not giving us any real value, and we need to pay attention to it. So there are people who are not motivated. There are some people who aren't capable, but I don't really believe that. I believe people are way more capable if they put their mind to it. I think people are way more capable than we give them credit for because we all have our own set of skills. We have our own way of doing it. And this is now understood. You know, you go back 20 years, we didn't know flow theory of constraints and lean and how it applied to software very well. But there are several people out there now that really do. So what we want is for those people who are willing to put some effort in. And here's what's frustrating to me. And I admit I don't know what to do about this, but maybe just let it go and recognize this is how people are. I really believe I'm not, Amplio, as you know, Amplio University is not designed as a quick fix. It's designed as a transformation of individuals, how you think, how you approach. The minimum time I think it takes to get to where you can really start being different out of AU is 3 months. But I think it takes 6 months to get to be. And why is it 3 months? Well, because first of all, there's all the foundational stuff that I've got videos of and all that, but there's a lot of time in that. There's at least a couple days. And but you're not going to take 2 days training because that's not how you learn. You learn by learning something and trying it. It's learning in the workplace, not in the workshop. That's important. Well, that takes time. So the basic core start I think, takes about 3 months to go through, but then to get at the organization level, which is a lot of what y'all are wanting to do, then another 3 months. Why? I mean, you could actually say, well, that's really short time. And the reason it is a short time, relatively speaking. But the reason is because once you learn the core stuff, it expands throughout the organization. There's not another set. There's not this, let's learn this for the team, and then let's learn another thing for the department, and then let's learn another thing. No, if you're having to do that, you're messed up. Not you personally, but what you're learning is messed up because things should be scale free. And this is something Tom and I also talked a lot about is our methods are scale free. And that's right. Gravity works for this cup of coffee the same way it works for a car, the same way it works for a building. It's gravity. Now, you put it in different contexts, it shows up differently, but it's still gravity. There is gravity out in space, by the way. It's just offset by the going around the planet, the centrifugal force, and that's why things stay in their orbit. If you didn't have gravity in space, what you would have is things shooting off out into space. The fact that people say there's not gravity in space is such an indication how people aren't paying attention to context changes, how principles apply, how laws apply. It's just in our languaging. It's crazy. In fact, that'd be interesting. I'll do a chat GPT. Is there gravity in space? Let's see what it says. That'd be interesting. Okay. So you got the problems of people not motivated, not seeing hope, maybe not being competent, but I don't think that's the big problem. But then the motivation is there's internal motivation for learning. And then there's motivation like self-preservation, like getting my job, things like that. Well, as long as the measure of ability, the measure to be hired is a certification in how to follow something, then there is no motivation if you're trying to get a job. And that's the key. So I've actually come to the conclusion when I thought about this morning, not as detailed as this, I'm just kind of rambling in my thoughts here, but is we do need a certification program, but not a certification like what's been done, but a certification that's meaningful and that covers different levels. And I've talked about this before, but now I get why it's so important. It's so important because certification could be a way to expose to people what's needed. Like you should know how to do a diagnosis. You should be certified in that. Do you know how to do a diagnosis? Well, we have a GPS, we have other methods. You should know how to make a change to your workflow without having to run an experiment, or more or less. Sometimes you do. But I'll tell you, I've run experiments. I've tried some things that but they weren't that often, and most of them were decades ago. Like I remember when we had the idea of having I didn't have it. Alan Shuttlewata, our top consultant at Net Objectives, had the idea to coordinate teams by having a shared backlog. Well, I'd never seen it before. I never heard anybody talk about it before, but it was consistent with lean flow. And I remember when I said, "Yeah, let's try it out and see what happens." See, that was an experiment. But the next time I did it, it wasn't an experiment because I knew it would work. Yeah, Susan.
But the next time you did it, it wasn't an experiment from your point of view, but it probably was from the point of view of the people you were working with.
Yes, it could have been. And the first next two, three times it probably was. And there was some level of trust. But what I then learned, so this is such a great point, Susan, thank you. But then what I then learned was why did it work? And then the way I would teach it wasn't let's try this. So let's go. There's three levels. I love this because I've never quite thought about it this way. First time through, we don't know what to do. Let's run an experiment. Oh, it worked. Fabulous. Next time, I can't quite explain why it works, guys, but I've been in this situation before and we did this and it worked. Is it okay to try it? An experiment for them, even though I expect it to work. But then we figured out why it worked. And then I stopped telling them what to do. This goes back now about 2006. At that point, I didn't need to tell anybody what to do. I knew why it worked. I knew they didn't know why it worked. Remember, that's what we said is the difference between experts and those with less competence. So what I would do is I would ask them questions. I would have them pull from their own experience to understand the principles of why it worked. And now they surmised it would work. And maybe it was an experiment to them, but now it was an experiment where they were pretty sure it was going to work. Like the guy I remember kept standing up, one of the managers said, "Al, if I believe what you're saying about lean, and I do, then we need to do," and he would talk about what we needed to do. And when he finally decided he was going to do that, it wasn't an experiment to him anymore. He knew it was going to work based on his past experience because he was using theory to relate his past experience to the current situation in his context. You can't do that without theory. It's impossible to do that without theory. And even if you do it without theory, people will resist it because they don't understand. That's the whole Semmelweis example. Okay, so here are the two things. I've spent more time on this, but I think this is really important. Let me just pause for a minute, and then I'll go into the other two things quickly because they won't take much time. Does this ring true for you? A lot of you are, you know, don't have my or Susan or Thomas's gray hairs. Sorry, Patrick, you don't have any gray hair. Uh, but but does it ring true? Can you see how this was set up by the past and how we're in this now and how we're kind of in a trap in the way we're going? And you've got all these people who've made their livelihoods getting us here being very defensive because it's not just their livelihood is in danger. I think their self-identity is in danger.
But
In other words, you've done something that didn't work out. It doesn't feel good. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, but it's part of any transformation, the resistance to whatever that change is. Because
Yes.
the reality of it is, at that point in time, it was effective for what was going on. Life is a dynamic learning process.
Yes.
But what it, they got into the point where they feel if they have to change their position, then it's more of a repudiation of themselves, which it shouldn't be. That means you're making it too personal.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point, Patrick, because it really is that, and that gives me a clue on something here, which I just need a deep breath on this one. Okay, so there are two levels of people out there in a sense. One are those people who are at the effect of it. And I think there it's easier to show here's how you can go from where you are to a better way. And then there are those who have been at the cause of it. And I can actually recognize that where they're, in fact, this was an insight I got a few days ago, that a lot of this attachment to Scrum, attachment to Agile as it's defined, is really based on fear. This defense is fear. Their identification, like you just said, they're not just like this is an intellectual thing they've had. This is an identification they've had. This is something I learned to give up. Oh, I think I learned to give it up when my research project failed in my master's at MIT. So I was working on some really cool stuff about blood type, histocompatibility. I had this brilliant woman, the PhD, who was leading it, and we messed it up. And I didn't realize we messed it up until I wrote my thesis and rewrote it, and I had to rewrite it about 5 times. My advisor wouldn't let me leave. That's where I learned to write. And I realized that I had totally messed it up out of my independence. My main advisor was out of the country that year on sabbatical, and I just did the research the way I wanted to, and it was wrong. Massive learning. We could have done something really unique, and we blew the opportunity, and that was real heartbreaking for me. But it was a massive learning experience for me. That when you do research, you're not just out there trying to figure out, see what happens. It was pattern recognition with blood cell types. It was really cool stuff. But what I realized I hadn't done is properly laid the ground. And I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And I knew I hadn't known what I was doing. And I knew I wasn't going to do that again. I was going to learn what I need. That was a major thing for me in 77. I was going to learn when I didn't know what I was doing instead of just being cavalier about it. So yeah, that was a failure, but it was a success at the same time because I was in school. I mean, the whole idea, but I missed the potential. So I kind of gave up some of that identity back then. I identified not as being a good researcher, a smart guy. I'm an MIT graduate, I mean, I'm an NSF fellow. I had all the credentials. When I left MIT, I had a company want me to lead just out of college, out of graduate school, a pattern recognition department, major company. And I actually chose not to for personal reasons to where I wanted to live. But um, the reality was I knew had to do something different. I had some humility. That's hard to believe back then if you knew me. But but there was a core anyway. And that's why I've been accused of being a serial adopter. But see, so what we need to do maybe is shift people's identity with not that I know, but that I learn. Because the world is changing too fast and knowledge isn't that useful anymore in the sense it is useful. But ChatGPT and these, they can give me the knowledge. What's useful is how do I use it? How do I learn? How do I decide what's good and what's not good? Okay, anything else? Sorry, a little bit. Okay. So so let me talk about this new way of looking at Amplio just for 5 minutes and then talk about the certification because I'm now convinced this is essential. So I have bandied, as you've seen me, sometimes saying it is a framework, it isn't the framework. If it's a framework, it's a configurable framework and all this. And I think I had some fear myself about getting to what it truly is. What is it I truly do? And what I had been doing, because I'm giving this one up. I think I'm holding myself back. There is power in putting things in the perspective of the way people think about things. There is power to that. You've seen me talk about UX. You look at where they're coming from, how they look at things. You talk about how do I get people to understand flow? I have them use their experience and come from their experience to what they need to know. How to improve an organization, see where they are, and then come from that. So I'm not recanting any of that. That absolutely, absolutely true. But taking a model that doesn't work and trying to make it work is not necessarily the right thing. And this is actually one of the great quotes by Fuller. This has bothered me for months now. Anything that bothers me for months because maybe it's true and I'm ignoring it was this: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I've been trying to fix frameworks. Those days are over. Frameworks are inherently flawed for any number of reasons. Every framework out there. The definition of a framework is flawed. I mean, when you do something that's defined as a framework, it's flawed. Now, in the DAVSC, which I co-created, had a lot of help with it. DA Discipline Agile is not a framework. It's never been a framework. I remember talking to Mark Lines about it, one of the, Mark and Scott, years ago. And he said, no, it's not a framework. It's a collection of practices and choosing how you choose your way of working and all that. So that idea is good. I've taken it a lot further by having patterns and things like that. But if you think about it, what we've been talking about in Amplio is looking at, well, where are you? Now, whether you're doing Scrum or Safe, nobody really does Scrum or Safe. They set up a bunch of agreements based on what they think Scrum or Safe is and how they can do it. What people have is a set of tacit, explicit, and non-existent agreements and how they're working, okay? And then there's what they say they're doing and what they actually are doing. What Amplio really is, and I can go back through the whole history of this. I can go back to, like I said, there are about 3 or 4 previous versions of Amplio. I mean, I've been working on this thing for a long time, 20 years almost. And in all of them, what I've been trying to do is what are the agreements you make that are effective? And then I've used something like at one time we had the inflection point system, which were about 30, 40 different decisions you made, and then you lived on those decisions. Actually, not unlike what we have now, but more structured and less theory. Then there's the configurable framework, which is what I'd been talking about more recently. But think about it this way. There's what you need to accomplish, identify what needs to be accomplished with a GPS. So I'm not actually changing Amplio. I'm just talking about it differently. I want to be clear about that. Everything we've done, there's still based on flow, lean, theory, constraint, human-centered development. It's all that's there. All the pieces are there. But now you talk about the pieces this way. You say, well, where are we? What are our problems? Let's pull up, let's pull up the Amplio system. You still have this guy. This is still there. But now you look at this a little differently. You say, well, what are the agreements between these different roles or divisions or groups or whatever? Like planning. What's planning? How does planning relate to all these different people? It's an activity. So you have activities in that you can think of as islands with how they relate to the other people as the agreements we make. Susan, I think you made some comment about this once, and Thomas, you as well, where if you think of this as a system and it's about the relationships between the pieces, those relationships are agreements about things. So this is nothing new in that regard.
Sounds like something
Uh,
Andrew would have said. Andrew
who would have
Count.
said?
Andrew. He views the model through that
Oh,
lens
yeah,
of the
that's right.
agreement. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's an ACOF guy, a systems thinker. So I've always viewed it this way as well, actually. And I don't know why. Well, I know why. Well, there are 2 reasons. There's a technical reason. I thought if I put it in the terms of frameworks, it would be easier to understand. But now you're trapped in that. And I think, to be candid, I was a little afraid of explaining the truth way here because it seems a little abstract. But no, people understand agreements. So what are the agreements here? Who has the agreements? How is this? That's basically what I'm saying it is. So now what we have is we have all the same pieces. Take Alexandrian patterns. They're perfect. Why? Because an Alexandrian pattern that fits in a pattern language has planning as how does it relate to all these things around it. And it tells you what forces are there. So we have the way of talking about the relationships between the different things. And we now say, okay, planning and MVIs is the relationship. But if I'm doing the planning, I can decide how I want to do the planning myself. Nobody has to tell me. So I solve the problem of we get to pick our way of working, but we have to do it in the context of the organization and the way we make agreements. And then when it comes to teams, I can have one team be sprints and I get another team be flow. It's up to the team. But the way it interacts with everybody else has to be agreed to. And if I need it the same across the organization, I can. So all of a sudden, Amplio is being defined as a set of agreements, how you make them, and then giving people the choice to do them. Now, I want to put a little caution in here, not caution, but if somebody's, oh my God, but I need a framework to talk to people. Okay, this is what's cool. You can do that. You can actually say, well, these agreements basically are a framework for thought. Now you can, if you want to talk about the set of agreements as a configurable framework, that the agreements are in fact the pieces and you can change them as you want to. Well, that was really the idea of why I was coming up with the patterns in that list, because you could actually say, well, here's what we're doing. And that was part of the collaborative engagement to figure out what was going to go on. So you can definitely do that. So I'm going to talk about this more. In fact, I'm thinking of going ahead and having a session tomorrow at 2, the new, normally after this week, we were going to have 2 o'clock Pacific time sessions. And in fact, maybe I'll do that. I was asking Sumathi, a new person who just enrolled, who's on the East Coast and wanted a later session. That's why I added this session. But I think I'll do that tomorrow. I think I will do that. I think I'm going to do a review in the ACOP, but I would like to make this transition a little bit more. So anyway, is it clear that this does not change Amplio the least bit? It just changes how you explain it. Is there any like, oh, I don't see this, or I've got a qualm about that? Yeah, it's such a great word. I love it too. You too. It's great. Okay. Because if it comes to that, let me know. I'm sorry, Abisi, there's a lot of noise on your, I couldn't understand you. Say it again.
I was saying that what you are implying is that Amplio is not defined as the relationship all of these components are
Yeah,
related.
can somebody else understand? I'm getting a lot of distortion. Do you have a microphone or something? Maybe if you got a headset, maybe take it off and use just
Okay.
the mic. Say it again.
Okay, can you hear me
Yeah.
better?
Yes, much better. That's good.
Okay, I was saying, if I understand you, you are trying to say that Amplio is now about the relationship. Is that what you are saying? And that it take
Yes.
from this?
Yes, it's about the relationships and the agreements people make with each other, and the
Okay.
relationships define how they work together. And then that enables people to work the way they want to, as long as they keep those outside agreements. So how I do, say, full kit plan, how I do MBIs or something is up to, what does an MBI mean across the organization needs to be agreed to, but how I actually create them. Well, if I want to create them from the bottom up, I can. If I want to create them from the top down, I can. So in a sense, there's this mapping from in a framework, you have practices that are self-contained. And now we're saying that practice is how do you do it? You get flexibility, but how you relate to other people, that's defined by an agreement you make. So that's kind of it right there. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's same system. Let's look at that case study you had talked about, Abizi, where we did value stream mapping and stuff. Weren't we looking at the different relationships as we went through and each step of the way? I mean, this is what value stream mapping is, isn't it? You're taking each step of the way. You have activities. You talk about how one group of people work at one level at each step, how they relate to each other. It's all about relationships and actions. That's all that's going on is relationships and actions. And when you make it a framework that's immutable, or that's purposely incomplete, causes a lot of work. It appears to be helpful because it's if it was well defined, but it isn't. But ultimately, we need to figure this out anyway. Vanessa, in the work you've been doing and talking about MBIs and milestones and things like that, what you've been concerned about is what are people agreeing to? What do they understand? So we're just saying, instead of having some arbitrary label out there on a disk someplace, we're saying, no, well, let's get clarity, and we'll use what we know about product management to make those agreements. And here's the thing, if you have somebody who's doing SAFe, or you have somebody who's doing Scrum, then just switch. Like I'm not giving up on the Amplio Scrum thing, but what it is now, and it's easier to talk about this because I'm not trying to extend Scrum. I'm saying I'm just patterning it after the fact that you've got all these roles, events, artifacts, and rules. But now, instead of these actions, these things you're saying you have to do, I'm saying these are the agreements you're making. Like every week or 2 weeks, we're going to do planning. Every 1 or 2 weeks, we're doing this. These are agreements we made. And what is the purpose of the agreement? And who is involved in the agreement? See, that's the thing. What's the action? What's the purpose? Who's involved in it? What are the relationships? And it's a transition like Scrumban. Scrumban was a transition from Scrum to Kanban. People forget that because it sounds like it's a thing. It was a transition. I was the one who noticed that it could be an endpoint. And in fact, that's why I asked Corey Lattice, who wrote Scrumban and created it. I had to ask him because he defined it as going from here to here. And I said, Corey, I noticed some people will like to go and apply lean and learn lean, but then they want to stop and still have iterations. Is that okay to call that Scrumban? Because it's now no longer a transition. It's now a middle point. And he said, sure. Because his attitude, there wasn't any such thing as Scrum or Kanban or Scrumban. It was all lean. So that in a coffee bar, and he went pounding on the counter. There's no Kanban, there's no Scrum, there's only lean. So this doesn't minimize how it can be used. In fact, I think it makes it clearer that you can use this attitude of Amplio to improve Scrum and to improve SAFe because you're making it your own. You're not pulling it out to make it your own. People are starting to talk about it. That's part of maybe what's gotten this. I've seen CST say, oh, you should pull things out from Scrum and use them. Don't worry about it if you don't call it Scrum. I'm saying, wait a moment. In fact, I got blocked for this because they said, wait a minute. So you're saying you're a guy training Scrum. How are you training? What are you really training if you're saying you don't have to follow Scrum, that you can pull things out of it? And then he got that pissed him off. I just noticed later I wasn't attached to him anymore. I don't mean broke the connection. The whole conversation was gone. Okay. So the thing is, what we need certification in this, and we need certification because people who are motivated and people who would be motivated if they saw a path out. So there are some people who are just motivated because they want to learn whether there's a path out or not. I know a lot of people, you all are for one. There's a lot of trust here, and I appreciate that. There are people who would be motivated if they saw a path out. And then there are a bunch of people who are not motivated. Maybe there are a bunch that will be motivated by fear. Fear is a great motivator at times. So it isn't the question of certification, like certification that you can get the job done. I mean, I'm not going to certify something unless I know people can get it done. But what I mean is, it's weird, but the certification that's needed is certification so other people will know you can get the job done, which is, I guess, what the purpose of certification is anyway. So I'm not looking at certification and Amplio like, oh, you learn this, you learn this, you learn this. No, not interested in it. I don't think that will make a difference. We need certification that will let HR, will let recruiters, will let managers know that this person can solve my problems. It's not certification in Amplio, it's certification in solving problems using Amplio. Okay, now this is actually, as I say this, it's so obvious that that's true. But I never said it that way, right? I mean, you're always developing something from the perspective of the customer. And in this case, the customer is both the person who's learning, but also the person they're trying to get a job with. Because if you don't satisfy that, there's no market, and you're not going to satisfy the consultant. Not true. I mean, I'm talking about that market segment. Do you know what I'm saying? The people who are out there looking for jobs. You guys are just out here learning and solving your problems. And to me, that's the highest form of it all. That's great. But you get this other market segment I'm talking about. So does this make sense, what I've said, and looking at certification that way? Or tell me what I'm missing. Okay, well, last bit on this. Yeah, I've covered this. Last bit on this, because I'm going to resurrect something. And again, this is a volunteer. You guys did not, we have projects and there's sometimes people like to do them and all that. But not years ago, it seems like years ago. Maybe it was. I've been at this 3 years now. We talked about a community certification program, and I'm going to open it for that, but I'm going to do it if nobody volunteers for this project anyway, because I think it's important. So I'm going to, between now, maybe we'll continue this tomorrow afternoon. So I'm going to hold this session regardless of whether Samatha can come or not. But I'm going to identify what I think are some of the things we need to be certifying in, both because people need the capability of doing it, and it will be managers, HR, and recruiters will recognize it as important. And then what I have to do then, and we had some of this, we had some already in the foundations. There were a lot of questions, but there's more. And then I'll come up with a way to do certification by having questions listed, and then it being a combination of self-certification and conversations. Maybe we'll do a session on certification and people talk. And like I've already certified a bunch of you guys, and several of you I would certify just asking me to, because I interacted with you enough. Thomas, Vanessa, clearly you too. And I think Susan and Patrick are already certified. People are here. Abisi, you too, I think, but I'll have to check. If I haven't put it up on the website, let me know. But the point is, to really do this well, I think it's going to accelerate if we have a community effort. I think it would be a cool side project to say, how do you know when somebody knows? And that's what certification is. And I think it's a problem-solving thing. And it's an open book test. You're not going to find it on ChatGPT anyway. So I do want to be clear. I'm talking about demonstrating ability of understanding to get problem solved. Okay, so good. I feel good. Now I know what I'm doing tomorrow for sure at 2 o'clock. Okay, comments. Is this thumbs up? I'm not sure. Thumbs down. Okay. Oh, and to be clear, I'm sorry.
It sounds like it's moving in the right direction, and I'm
Yeah,
very
yeah, good. I felt y'all would, because I'm not motivating this from it's not a marketing thing. It's an expansion of what we need to do. And anybody in the program now is grandfathered in. I might charge certification in the future for this general thing. I've already said I would for something like for the Scrum thing, but I think these things are just part of the program. And the way I envision it would be this. The way I envision it would be we actually come up with a list of what it means, problems to solve. And then I think it would be very cool if a few of you wanted to be kind of a committee, because you will learn something. If what you did is you think you're certified and and then you have conversations with people to see, that's the best way to learn, is to see people struggle with problems and see how to help them in their struggle with problems. Because that's the only place it really works. And that's why I like working with some of you offline and seeing what your real issues are, because that's how I learn how this still applies. So I think the certification program itself is a learning opportunity, and we'll have to see how we do that. Okay. Okay, well, pretty amazing. I'm right at, and I really hadn't planned this out. I just told the story, and we're right at time to end. So tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, like we do the ACOP, I'm going to give an overview of Amplio, of the pieces. And tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to continue this. I've started making a list. It's funny. I started making a list of what of what a good framework is. And now I realize you need to shift from frameworks to working agreements. And I'll talk about that as well. And that'll be the list of what we need to certify in. Okay, all good. Thank you.
PM tomorrow is what time in EST?
Okay, so in EST, the community practice is 11 as always.
Yeah.
And then we have a new session I'm doing Tuesdays now at 5 EST. And the reason I
Okay.
picked this, that's different time than everything else. So our afternoons went either from 4 EST to on Monday and Thursday, they're now 3 EST. And the reason for that is so people in Australia could attend before they go to work. And the 5 EST, the new one on Tuesday, is now so people on the East Coast who want to come after work can do it. And again, in the A sessions, we have it here. So, and I just have decided to add the 2 p.m. here. This is all Pacific. So this is the new schedule going forward, as I've added this session. Now, the first few of these are probably going to be more summary and reviews. I'm not adding an extra hour to attend to of new content, but I'll probably do that for a week or two, and then we'll figure out the way the content on those sessions is going to be will be figured out later. I do think it would be a good idea to, the way I see it now is that the 2 p.m. sessions or 5 p.m. Eastern will always be synopsis of things that have happened. Now, the reason I'm thinking that is for those people on the East Coast who can't be attending these other sessions because it's in the middle of work, these would be great summary sessions for them to look at. It'll also give me a way to record some of the things we've done that have sometimes been in formulation. So I like that. So that's probably what that track is going to always be, as kind of a summary. Now, if you like hearing the things going deeper, then attend it. But I don't think I'm going to put anything new in these sessions. I think it'll be more purpose that way without adding an extra hour for those of you who don't want the extra hour and yet still cover everything. Of course, I love it if y'all here too, but I appreciate the burden of time to stay abreast of things. And again, every fourth week, we will only have the ACOP session. Okay. All good. All good. Yeah, I think this is actually pretty exciting. Take care then.
Yeah, bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.